When you become sexually active, the way to prevent or minimize your risk of developing a sexually transmitted infection would be to be as monogamous as possible, one partner at a time. Be judicious or selective about your partners. We're afraid to ask questions, but there's nothing wrong with asking questions. You know, some people say, well, I don't want to, how you ask someone about their HIV status? Well, you know, you can ask them or you can not ask them.
The S.H.E.L.T.U.H podcast stands for Sharing Health Equity and Leverage to Urban Households. We strive to use this platform to provide efficient dialogue that not only highlights the issues that face our community, but also provides solutions. As physicians in training, we seek to revolutionize healthcare delivery by advocating for those who cannot advocate for themselves in order to establish equity in our cities. Dr. Charisse is a gynecologist with over 20 years of experience and a special interest in integrative health. She is native of Chicago and a graduate of the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. She earned her medical degree from the University of Southern California School of Medicine and completed training in obstetrics gynecology at the University of Illinois Chicago Medical Center. So with all that being said, let's dive right in. Dr. Charisse, welcome to the S.H.E.L.T.U.H podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.
Welcome, Dr. Charisse. Can you tell us a little bit about what brought you into OB-GYN?
What brought me into OB-GYN? I always had a keen curiosity, so learning, especially in the sciences, was always a passion for me. I wanted to do something that would kind of elevate me, move me to the next level. I'm talking about myself as a kid. Where I grew up, we didn't have a whole lot, and education was a high commodity thing. So I wanted to pursue that, and as far as OBGYN is concerned, I wanted to answer a lot of questions that I had for myself, for my own health, and I always had a very keen interest in women's health in terms of endocrinology and reproductive health, and so it was really satisfying my personal curiosity, my intellectual curiosity, and wanting to move myself and my family to a higher level economically.
It's such an important topic for a lot of women in our community. So in terms of first exposure, when should a young lady first see a gynecologist?
Well, typically it's age 21 because that's the age where we want you to start doing your, young ladies to start having their screening for cervical cancer and breast cancer awareness, not necessarily breast cancer screening. Also, if a woman, because it's not unusual to become sexually active before the age of 21, for a young girl or woman when she becomes sexually active, that's another time to consider seeing a gynecologist. Now, she may have a pediatrician that she's comfortable with and has a relationship with, and so she might be referred by her pediatrician to a gynecologist at that first, or a primary care physician may refer her. But generally speaking, it's the time to start the pap smears and pelvic exams at 21 or when becoming sexually active.
In reference to the whole annual exams, there's this big surge in holistic, natural medicine. Like, why is nutrition so important when it comes to OB-GYN health?
Okay, so we're talking about integrative and natural approaches to staying well, and the best way to do that is through nutrition. I mean, everything we need is in nature, right? With the sunlight we have air. We have soil and things that grow from the soil. And this is not a foreign concept, right? I mean, since the beginning of humanity, that's how we survived. So the same applies today, except when you grow up in an urban area, you know, that we talk about food deserts and there not being enough, you know, naturally grown food. And so you see us eating and having a lot of access to preserved conveniences, preserved foods, fast foods. And so with those compromise our health. So to stay healthy naturally would be to use natural, as much as you can, natural foods, things I like to say to patients, things that are not in a box or a bag. So that eliminates a lot of things, right? Even now you get nature or natural bars, those nutrition bars, right? They're wrapped up so they have preservatives and things. The best way to eat and to get all of your nutrients is fresh fruits and vegetables, grains, nuts, seeds, all of those things that maybe some of us didn't have a lot of access to growing up. And they tend to be more costly because they're fresh, right? So they don't stay on the shelves long. So you have to purchase them more frequently. And it's easier to buy things that are already packaged that you can keep on the shelf for 2 or 3 weeks. But that compromises our health. Naturally speaking, exercise, drinking. I've had several patients that tell me they don't drink water. Drinking water, why not? It doesn't taste good, it doesn't have sugar in it, it doesn't have all the flavors,
So they just
right?
walking around dehydrated?
No, they just drink everything else.
Oh, okay.
They're drinking sodas and they're drinking flavored beverages,
This is what tastes
energy
good to us,
drinks.
right?
Yeah, it's what tastes good. So very simple things that seem pretty obvious, but for a modern convenience standpoint, it's not always convenient to get something that's fresh. It's more convenient to grab something on the go or to have something you can just throw in your bag. But there are ways to be on the go and still eat healthy. So eating healthy, exercising on a regular basis 3 to 5 times a week, at least 30 minutes a day, fresh water, drinking plenty of water, 6 to 8 glasses a day. Those are the real key elements and very basic elements to staying healthy.
That's true. So with regards to the holistic health, because the whole idea is this: food is your medicine, right? And I think that the way that we are transitioning towards this whole idea of using a pill to sort of solve your remedies is becoming obsolete. But in order for that to happen, we got to use food as our medicine. And in reference to the food too, this whole idea of staying active, can you please talk about how, in addition to maintaining this healthy, balanced meal as far as lifestyle modifications, can you talk about also your activity level has a significant impact with regards to OB-GYN health?
Okay. So, I'm an OBGYN, of course, and so women's health is important to me and reproductive health, right? But that is part of being healthy completely. I mean, as a woman, you have more than your reproductive organs, right? So everything else that you have as a man, I have as a woman for the most part. And so it really is about complete health, being healthy in general. The same thing pretty much applies to women's health. In terms of activity level, just moving as much as possible. So for example, if you have a job where you sit 8 hours a day, well, you say, well, I don't have time to exercise. I leave work and then I have to go home and I have to take care of the kids or whatever. And I don't, how am I going to exercise? Well, some simple things that you probably have heard are maybe taking the stairs or parking a little bit further. We like to park as close to the door as possible, but maybe you park further away so you walk a little bit, get some steps in. Using a Fitbit or some other Apple Watch or something that is affordable for you to be able to monitor. Sometimes just seeing how much you're moving actually helps you to move more, or seeing how little you're moving helps you to move more. When we say exercise 3 to 5 days a week, at least a half hour a day. That may not mean necessarily going to the gym. It may just mean going for a walk, or like I just mentioned. It may mean, if you have something at home, a Stairmaster or something that you can do at home, that's great. But generally, aerobic exercise is the key. Weight-bearing exercise is great, but if you are carrying your own weight around and walking, that's weight-bearing exercise. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be lifting weights. To get a weight-bearing exercise in. And that's really key for bone health as well.
So growing up, we had to get some of our education, whatever ways we can when it came to sexual health, in terms of sexually transmitted infections, right? And I think that it's an important component of living a healthy life, right? Something that should be talked about more, especially in adolescence, so that you can make good decisions. Can you talk about a few of the sexually transmitted infections in terms of like preventions, symptoms, and just screening in general that people, because it's man and woman, right? Should be cognizant of.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for sure, we should do a better job at educating. You'd be surprised at how often someone says that they didn't know that particular piece of information. And we have a lot of access to information online, and sometimes it's not accurate. So we have to we're almost re-educating our young people because of the things that they're learning elsewhere. I mean, you remember as a kid, when we were a kid, before the internet, or before when I was a kid, before internet, you learn things on the street from your friends, out on the playground, out playing, on the block. Right. And now the kids are learning from people all over the world, basically. A lot of things that they learn on television. So what they need to understand about sexually transmitted infections is they can occur, anyone can get a sexually transmitted infection, not just, people have stigmas, like certain people are at risk. Anyone can have, when you have sexual contact, you can become infected with a sexually transmitted infection. Those are gonorrhea, chlamydia, herpes, HIV, those things. Trichomonas, things that people don't really think of as sexually transmitted infections are. How do you prevent those? Well, one obvious reason is a way to do that is to not have sexual contact, but that's not realistic. When you become sexually active, the way to prevent or minimize your risk of developing a sexually transmitted infection would be to be as monogamous as possible, one partner at a time. Be judicious or selective about your partners. We're afraid to ask questions, but there's nothing wrong with asking questions. Some people say, well, I don't want to, how you ask someone about their HIV status? Well, you can ask them or you can not ask them. And that, you have to be responsible for whatever choice you make. And we're talking about women's choices, right? That's what we're talking about.
Being candid about it.
Yeah, and just making choices. Just understand that's your choice, okay? You can't blame anyone else. Using protection. So the most obvious is the male condom, but there are female condoms which are cumbersome and harder to find, but there are female condoms as well. That is pretty much it in terms of protection and getting screenings, just going in once a year for your annual exam or anytime you feel like you have any kind of symptoms, burning, irritation, spotting, bleeding, anything unusual, pain, discomfort, going in and getting testing for that will prevent you from having an infection that progresses to further complications. Early treatment, early recognition, early diagnosis, early treatment is the way to prevent complications.
You bring a valid point, because the thing is, though, I grew up in a household where conversation was very candid. I go in 56 in May, we have open conversations about any and everything, right? And so I believe that. And from my grandmother, my father's mother, she'd be like, you know what, if you laying down with it, you can ask a question. Because you can,
that's real.
Hopefully you have a conversation before that action takes place.
Good,
right?
good.
So I think a lot of times it can be taboo. And I don't understand it because, listen, if you are having relations with someone, conversation be something that's easy, right? So if I can share this experience with you, I can share my results with you, right? Before we get to this point, sweetheart, this is what's been going on, this is what's been clear, I'm negative, you see this, right? Just having that valid conversation. And so I think that's lost within our
I think it has a little bit to do with where you grew up too. Because I think growing up in my household, like we never necessarily had that conversation with two African parents, to sex. And so I think that you bring up a very valid point. I think it's very important that we take into consideration people's households and where they, and making people feel comfortable enough to be able to ask their partner that question, because it's a very important question, right?
Can't judge a book by its cover either. Right. Just because she pretty and pink and all these other type of colors, we got to ask them questions.
You're right.
I don't discriminate against pink, but blue, red, green, whatever. You feel what I'm saying? Just be front.
Well, you both bring up some really good points. It is a cultural experience for some people to be able to feel more comfortable asking questions and addressing difficult topics, the conversation, family upbringing. You have to be comfortable asking someone a question and asking questions that are uncomfortable. Being able to ask, it's a good screening tool too. If you ask someone about their status and they get funky about it, maybe that's an indication to you very early on that maybe this is not the person that I should be intimate with, you know,
Right.
or continue a relationship with. So those are some little things to keep in
Make a
mind.
little swerve. Put that turn signal on and just turn. You know, transition.
Yeah.
So this is women's choice. Could you talk a little bit about hygiene when it comes to young women and women in general in terms of vaginal health? Again, you're educating us brothers too, so we'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I like to mention too, when we talk about educating the brothers, educating our men, men are fathers,
Yes.
men are brothers. One day your mother's going to may need your help, you know.
I'll have no problem doing it.
Right? So you need to understand you came from a woman, you may be giving birth to a woman or having, you know, fathering a young woman.
Yes.
So you need to understand these things. But in terms of hygiene, I think it's very simple if you think about hygiene in general. I think sometimes women, and historically women, have complicated female hygiene by using things in the past that were really common, like douching, was that cleaning the vagina, rinsing it out, washing it out. Well, you have a natural flora there. You have organisms that grow there, and there's a balance, there's a little ecosystem down there. And you want to keep that balance in place. Because when you disrupt that, you make it easier for certain organisms to grow more quickly and readily than others. So if you're exposed to something, you may have altered the environment that is there to protect you. You know, you have all these organisms there, they create a pH environment and things too. So when you do come in contact with something that changes the pH, your body is able to make the adjustment. So when you rinse and change all of that, you can actually put yourself at more risk for infections. And when you have a disrupted pH, not only do you become more at risk for infections, one infectious situation can put you at a higher risk for other infections. For example, if you have a woman has bacterial vaginosis, which is very simple, it's not a complicated, severe infection, but it creates an environment that makes it more possible for an HIV infection to occur.
Really?
Yeah, so I mean, many of us have probably come in contact with the HIV virus. It's just like you come in contact with the flu virus or whatever. It's the environment that allows that organism to continue replicating or growing. What your immune system is unable to kind of squash the process. So we come into contact with things all the time. It's just a matter of us having the right tools, equipment, pH environment for our bodies to be able to regulate things.
Okay. One thing that, with regards to all that's going on, especially within the women's private area, her sacred place, upkeep is one thing that's definitely a big topic of conversation, specifically Kegel pelvic strengthening exercises. Can you talk about that? Because a lot of times, a lot of women are have the blessing of producing a lot of children, right? And what comes with that blessing is great responsibility, or there's a lot of upkeep with that. Can you talk about just as far as the importance of pelvic strength exercises and what that all entails?
I like your terminology. Sacred garden.
I'm trying my best.
Blessing of having multiple children. And first of all, I appreciate that, because I think as a group of people, historically, when we've had big families, it's been a negative thing, right?
Yes.
You know, can you afford it? You got all these kids. You're doing this and that. It is a blessing.
Right.
So I'm glad you recognize that. So as far as maintenance of the pelvic floor is what we're talking about. The pelvic floor are the muscles that keep the bladder and everything kind of up.
Keep it up.
And and we have other structures. You know, our abdominal muscles help keep things in their place. And then over time, those kind of start to sag a little bit too.
Six packs, right.
6 packs a day, 1 or 2 packs.
Big belly tomorrow.
But the point here is that there are things you can do. So with the stretching of the vaginal walls, the stretching of the pelvic floor, just like you can do exercises to strengthen your abdominal muscles, there are exercises you can do to strengthen your pelvic floor. Pilates are good. That's core exercises, but the pelvic floor is the bottom of the core. It's like the floor of the core. Oh, I like that, the floor of the core. The floor of the core. And so you can do, Pilates can help with that. I have a friend who's a Pilates physical therapist, Pilates physical therapist, but she focuses on pelvic floor physical therapy. So there are physical therapists that actually have exercises to target the pelvic floor. Kegels are things that you can do at home that really just isolate. Kegels. There are exercises that you can be taught to do. I can show patients during a pelvic exam how to isolate those pelvic floor muscles, to tighten them. And those are the muscles that help constrict the tube that comes from the urethra, that comes from the bladder. So you can actually, it's like kind of doing the exercise. If you can stop the flow of your urine, you kind of have isolated those muscles. So those are things that can be done. There are different procedures for women who have severe pelvic floor relaxation or severe vaginal prolapse, as we call it, procedures that can be done to correct that surgically. But before surgery, there are exercises. There's some energy-based approaches. So you may hear sometimes women talk about you may hear in the media or whatever, feminine rejuvenation. There are energy-based procedures, laser and radio frequency energy, that can be used to stimulate collagen production and help to tighten. But not one thing in isolation. It usually is a combination of those things.
Yeah. So I'm glad you spoke a little bit about that. So my first time exposure to a woman getting a C-section, I wasn't aware of how much trauma women go through during the birthing process. Excuse me. I got a whole new appreciation for what a woman goes through. So I'm glad you touched a little bit about that. So from our education, we know a little bit about stress and the factors that kind of play a role in adrenal function. But you talked about how a woman maintains her wellness. Can you talk about the role and the impact of stress and the adrenal on women's overall health?
Yeah, adrenal health, some may not really know what the adrenal is. The adrenal gland is two little glands that sit above the kidney, and they really are responsible for regulating the stress response for the most part. I mean, they have other functions as well. But when you feel afraid or endangered, your survival mechanisms kind of kick in. Your heart rate goes up, and your respirations and things, you're breathing, taking in more oxygen, blood circulating, getting you ready so you can act to protect yourself. I mean, that's the way I like to think about it. People talk about fight or flight. You know, you're ready to fight or you need to run, but you need energy to do both of those. So women's health and health in general can be compromised by, I call it maybe a dysregulation or a maladaptation of the stress response. And that it really happens in modern society because we're worried all the time. Yes. We're worried about something. We're worried about, what's going to happen if we're late, like I was today. I was stressed out in the car.
We flowing.
Worried about grades, performance.
Yes.
You're worried about what somebody's going to think about you. Now these kids, they're worried about what someone's going to say about them on social media. Well, their constant stress response, it's not what it's intended. It's intended for, kind of historically, you had to go out and gather, you got to gather some food, or you got to go out hunting, and you have to protect yourself. And then it's over, and then you just go on for the rest of your day. You're not like this all day long. And that's kind of what we are experiencing as a society now, where we're always kind of in this stress response mode. And that can have negative impact on the immune system. So we're more likely to get infections. We're seeing a lot of autoimmune disease these days. So that's kind of a dysfunctional immune system, which is attacking elements of the body instead of attacking viruses and bacteria, whatever that is intended to attack.
And for our audience, we're talking about like multiple sclerosis, talking about lupus, stuff like that.
Yes, those are autoimmune. A lot of IBS, inflammatory bowel disease. Those are Crohn's. Those things are very common now, and people probably hear about these frequently because there are a lot of medications that are being developed on a regular basis for these. So those are stress sensitive, I like to think of them. There are things that are, a lot of those diseases, people will know this, that when they're stressed out, they get triggered. People who have herpes or cold sores, that's an immune dysregulation where you're constantly getting these flare-ups, or psoriasis and different skin disorders. They tend to be triggered oftentimes by stressful events. So having, monitoring and managing your stress, and there are a lot of different ways we could talk about that, calming the nervous system, helps to manage and create an optimal environment for the immune system, which obviously is very helpful in terms of staying healthy.
You know, bring up a valid point because I have a family member, loved a woman to death, and she was having complications of pre-diabetes. And the reason was that her lower extremity, she was having ulcers. And she was dealing with a lot of things within the environment. And whenever something stressful happened, those ulcers would take months to heal, right? And so, and thing is, all about this adrenal response, your body releases cortisol when it's stressed out. Cortisol, what it does, it releases blood sugar in your body, which increases your blood sugar levels, right? And so, you bring up a valid point. I think we also, with regards to all the things that, you know, when you're seeing a specialist, anything like that, this whole integrative, holistic health, stress is one of the biggest factors that we all deal with, right? And if we can't properly manage ourselves and our mental capability, and a lot of it's conditioned, it's generational. We're developing this, we're raised into this, right? And so how do we sort of break this generational cyclical problem?
It's a good question, brother.
You know, I don't have the answers to that, but I think a good start is one, acknowledging it. You know, if you walking around in your neighborhood, you gotta look across your shoulder every 5 minutes. That's a problem, right? And so I think that even with, you know, some, unfortunately, a lot of our people in our community are obese, right? They can't go outside because some things going on outside, you feel me? So they can't walk a few blocks, you know? So I think that, you know, granted, this platform is being used to sort of provide solutions, but it definitely needs a comprehensive and holistic view for us, what we're trying to do and solve this issue. So
there's no one fix, there's no one
exactly,
answer.
no one fix for this.
It is holistic, and it's a good point.
You know, speaking with holistic, one thing that also in my mind is a lot of women are, as they advance beautifully in the aging like wine out here, not like milk. One thing that comes as a big topic is menopause, right? Now, my personal experience, I know you have some personal experience with menopause, but my personal experience, I'm sure definitely going to share with the audience our personal experience with menopause, is that a lot of times, I think it was around like 3 or 4 years ago, I was in a car, and my mother's like, it's hot in here. I'm like, yo, like the windows are down, you know, got the air conditioner on, like what's going on? Why is it so hot in here? And even before that, my grandmother, she had a beauty shop, and she would be, you know, my father's mother, she did hair for a long time. And she would just be all of a sudden just break out in sweats. And I'm like, yo, what? Like, it's actually pretty cool in here. Like, why you break out in sweats?
Little beads on the forehead, yeah.
Exactly. Beat it up, you know, patting down. Can you please talk about, you know, menopause and what women should
What is it?
What is it? Yeah, first of all, what is it? Yeah.
So menopause, which I'm sure many do know, but for those who don't, is menopause. It's the pause, it's the cessation, it's the stopping, it's the end of the menstrual life, okay? Reproductive life. The time period, there's a time and season for everything, right? So there's a time to reproduce, and there's a time to stop reproducing and enjoy your life.
Right.
And there are ways you can enjoy your life without running around telling everybody how hot you are and you know.
I'm glad you said enjoy your life as opposed to things coming to a cessation.
That's a very important
It can
point.
be seen as a beautiful season of life. And we talk about how people manage stress. It's really in the mind. It's how do you think about the circumstances around you? What do you think about menopause? If you think that menopause is this terrible time in your life, you're going to be miserable, then that's exactly what's going to happen. But menopause doesn't have to be that way. So what's happening is the reason that the reproduction stops is that the ovaries, they stop producing, they start to kind of quiet down and eventually stop releasing an egg every month, which leads to reproduction, right? That you need that egg released every month. So that process stops. Well, what also happens is the ovaries start to diminish in terms of producing estrogen and progesterone, testosterone. So those hormone levels start to fall, and that's a lot of what women experience in response to that. Sleep changes in their sleep pattern, which may make them a little more crabby because they didn't sleep very well. Maybe they're not sleeping very well because they have hot flashes at night or night sweats, and that they have to keep getting up. Maybe they're having some changes in their pelvic floor. So now they're feeling like they have to use the restroom all of the time and they have to get up in the middle of the night. But those are things that those are symptoms that can be managed. And some of it is just kind of helping women to restore the natural restore a balance. It's not so much that there's a drop, but there's a imbalance, and we can help with that. And that doesn't always mean that women need to have hormone replacement, although that is an option for many women. It might be making adjustments in your lifestyle, making adjustments. Maybe you got to cut down on the caffeine so you can sleep a little better at night. When you get your sleep back together, your melatonin levels kind of adjust. You can help restore that temperature regulation, that deregulation of your temperature, your internal thermostat that is causing you to have hot flashes. That can be managed. Exercise works wonders. Stress management helps. Things like body-mind medicine. I don't know if you guys know much about body-mind solutions like Tai Chi and yoga, meditation, just simple deep breathing exercises work wonders.
Activating that parasympathetic system.
Activating the parasympathetic, because the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system need to be balanced for the most part. They're going to be, there's going to be some imbalances, but we need to always try to find something closer to this than this. And so those things help to bring the parasympathetic level up to meet the sympathetic or bring the sympathetic down.
Beautiful.
So those are ways to manage the symptoms of menopause. And I hope I answered your question about what menopause is.
Yeah. Most definitely.
Yeah.
Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, one thing that also pops in my head is we mentioned how during a period of menopause, when women starts that process, the estrogen decreases. And I think we talk about at length, and also talk to my mother about this whole importance of vitamin D and calcium, because when that estrogen is gone, estrogen is very important with regards to musculoskeletal homeostasis. And so you have to, it's one thing when we are talking about, estrogen, progesterone, but then as young women start to progress into this menopause period, we also have to focus on how everything other than that OB/GYN health is also becomes much more important, right? So,
bone health.
That bone health is really important, because when estrogen goes down, just on a biophysical level, estrogen is one of the main things that ultimately promotes musculoskeletal homeostasis. And when the estrogen goes down, it means you need more vitamin D supplementation, more calcium supplementation. And so I think that is really important. I try to lecture my mother at length about this stuff,
Don't lecture your mother. Who told you that was okay? Nobody told you that was okay. That's not okay.
No. I don't lecture, but like I just try, throw a few nuggets, every now and then. Like, yo, ma, come on now, we gotta get on this now. So no, but she's listening, and so I think she's definitely understands that importance, because if you wait until menopause to take care of your health, it's a little late in the game for that. And so I think that's one I was already mentioning.
So a beautiful segue is pregnancy, right? All of us got here through pregnancy, no doubt. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of prenatal health care and what that means in terms of just starting off right?
Well, first of all, we're here, Women's Choice, right?
Yes.
And we're talking about women being as healthy as possible and why they should be healthy. Well, one of them is because we are intended or designed to reproduce. Okay, so not only are we being healthy for ourselves, so we can go to work every day and do what we have to do, take care of our families. If we're trying to, reach some level professionally, so we can be as productive as possible. Well, one of the other reasons that we want to be healthy is for reproductive reasons. We're bringing new life into the world. We want to have a healthy fetus. We want to have a healthy baby. If we have a healthy baby, we have a healthy newborn infant, and so forth. And we're modeling good health to those children for generations to come. So prenatal care is the beginning of that. The prenatal care is doing what you need to do to go in to make sure early diagnosis, right? So if you have maybe you didn't realize you're a young 20-year-old girl, you're pregnant, you have a baby, you never really went to the doctor, you've never been sick.
Right.
So how would you naturally know that you should go to the doctor and why you need to go? Well, if you get screening to make sure your fetus is normal, ultrasounds to make sure the anatomy looks good, you're going in to make sure, do you have sickle cell trait? Do you have sickle cell? Does your partner have sickle cell trait? Right. Now you know your risk for having a baby with sickle cell disease, for example. So early diagnosis, leads to early treatment. What do you need to ensure that you have a healthy fetus? Folic acid is really key, and that's something you really want to make sure you have good levels before conception, before you even get pregnant. But Vitamins, nutrients, you want to get those prenatal vitamins. Those are the key reasons to getting. And you want to make sure you have everything in place, so you have a doctor who's going to be looking after you. If you develop a complication, you have somebody who knows you and helps to take care of you, and to make sure you know where you're going to have that baby and how you're going to have it. Are you risk? Should you be having a vaginal delivery? Should you have a C-section?
Right, right. You mentioned this importance of folic acid, and I think a lot of our audience may not understand the importance of that. I think also too, because we learn in medical school, is that without adequate, because the thing is, once you conceive, right, there are a certain number of weeks when that spinal cord develops. So, or spinal column does. So, young ladies or people in general, it's very important to get your vitamins, because without, if you are folate deficient, that can lead to your spinal column not being developed properly. And so that's very important. As Dr. Charisse mentioned, that's one to make sure that's very well understood.
And folic acid is one of the B vitamins, and B vitamins are key essential elements, nutrients for neural development in general. So brain development, and even we're all developed, our brains are developed, but we're always creating new brain cells and repair and things like that. So DNA repair, all of that is a key. So not just in prenatal care, but certainly if a fetus doesn't start out with the proper nutrients, you kind of, they're not starting off at the best level of health just from day one.
Also too, brother, in reference to pregnancy, before that is menstruation. And I think that, what can you just talk about as far as the basis of menstruation to our audience?
Well, menstruation is basically your cycles. Some of us refer to it as your cycles, your monthly. Some people will say you're having your periods every month. Typically that starts around age 12. For some women, it may be 9, as early as 9 years old. For some, it may be as old as 13 or 14. But when that starts, that is the beginning of your reproductive life. Your body is getting ready to one day reproduce. And what happens is every month you have the environment is building, the hormones are moving around and making the uterus a good, safe place for a fetus to develop if you get pregnant. And if you don't get pregnant, you don't get the placenta and the signals that tell, those signals aren't there, so then you shed that lining every month. And so that's basically what's happening on a very basic level with respect to menstrual, monthly menstrual cycles.
And reference to, my bad, brother, reference to the monthly menstrual cycles, transitioning that into establishing or understanding the purpose of contraception, specifically birth control. And can you please talk about how the various forms of women, as far as, pill birth control that they can encounter, and what changes that should they expect when on these type of medications?
Well, family planning, we talked about that. I think we touched on the going and seeing your gynecologist at age 21. Part of that is to prepare you for, educate you so you know what to expect with your cycles, with your, should you become pregnant, do you want to become pregnant, do you not want to become pregnant? So you're making we used to call it family planning, where we talk to you about what your plans are for a family. Well, we don't really talk about it in that way anymore. Now it's just whether or not you want to get pregnant or not, or you want to prevent pregnancy. So we want to prevent pregnancy. How can you do that? I always say abstinence because it's just kind of funny to me, because nobody believes it ever happens. But abstinence,
but it's an option.
But it is an option. I think women, young women and men should feel comfortable with that choice if that is their choice. And I think we poo-poo and make people feel bad about making that choice. So aside from that is, if we talk about the process of getting pregnant. So it starts with the sperm, right? You can block the sperm. Okay, you can block the sperm from getting to the egg. That's a condom. Use a condom, cover up. The great thing about that is now we're also preventing sexually transmitted diseases, right? Okay, so that's great. The sperm gets up into the vagina and goes up into the cervix. How can we stop that process? There are things you can use, like a diaphragm. Nobody uses diaphragms anymore, but that used to be a way of putting something up to block the cervix so the sperm couldn't get into the cervix and find its way up. So intrauterine device is just a little thing that can actually be inserted through the cervix and into the uterus. So that's an IUD. And there are different types of IUDs. Then there is the tubes. You can block the tubes. Tubal ligation, a lot of people are familiar with that, tying the tubes. or putting like a coil or something in there to obstruct the egg and the sperm from meeting in the tubes.
Yes.
And then from there is the ovaries. So we can stop the ovaries from producing an egg every month, and that would be your birth control, as most people think about the birth control pill. And a lot of people will say, women will say, or young women particularly will say birth control, and they mean the pill. They don't realize that there are other options besides the pill. Then there are things like an implant that actually stop ovulation,
Yes.
implants
Yes.
under the skin, and vasectomy, which in our community doesn't seem to be a very popular option, but it's much less costly than a tubal ligation, easier and less risky and safer.
Vasectomy
is obstructing the vas deferens, or the
Yes.
tube that gets the sperm from the testicles into the
urethra. Yes, ma'am.
right.
And I had to read about this, but I found out also if you get a vasectomy, there's a period of time you have to wait.
I'm so glad you
You
brought
can
that up.
still
'cause
get
that's-
somebody pregnant.
Right. So, for instance, I definitely don't do, I'm not trying to specialize in anything that does vasectomies, but what Leslie is saying is that, fellas, if you do get a vasectomy, right, there's certain things you have to do to prevent your partner from getting pregnant. The meaning behind that is once you cut the tube, there can still be sperm in that pipe system, right? That system.
After
So
the-
if you do ejaculate, there is a chance that one of your one of the sperms could lead
Champions.
to, you want champions at that point. You're exactly right, brother. Will definitely achieve victory. At that point. So,
But the point there is that there are lots of options.
Yeah,
there are lots of
Yeah,
options.
lots of options.
And
Yes.
it doesn't have to be, the burden doesn't have to be on the woman.
Thank you.
But
Yes.
since she's the one that's going to get pregnant and carry the pregnancy to term, hopefully, she's the one that might want to take more ownership.
Yes, ownership
in
is
that.
yes, most definitely. One thing, I know we run up on time, but one of the biggest things that especially older Black women in our community face is fibroids. Can you please talk about what are fibroids and how fibroid complications can lead to fertility issues?
So fibroids are tumors that grow in this the wall of the uterus. They're muscular from the muscle in the wall of the uterus. And we need muscle in the uterus because that's what contracts to deliver the baby, help the baby to deliver. So those that growth of those tumors can be there. They can be benign, as we call them, meaning that they can be asymptomatic. So some women have them and don't even know they have them. They have no symptoms. They can cause pain. They can cause pressure on the bladder or other, depending on the size of them and how many there are. If they're closer to the lining of the uterus and they're kind of pushing into the cavity, they can cause abnormal bleeding cycles. But they are benign. They are not cancerous, is what women need to understand. So you don't need to do anything with them unless they're bothering you. But when they are a nuisance because of the heavy bleeding or because of the pain, then you want to go see someone to figure out why, what you can do about those. And at that point, when they're symptomatic, you're probably going to have something done about them. Whether and it again depends on your fertility, your plans for family planning. If you're wanting to have more children, you want to keep your uterus as intact as possible, that's one conversation. If you're done having children, there's another conversation, because then it may be a matter of having a hysterectomy or having the uterus removed. There are myomectomies, which are procedures to remove the tumors, but sometimes that can be, it can be problematic if there are a lot of tumors, and depending on where they are. For example, if they're near the fallopian tube, where the egg has to come out into the uterus and the sperm. If they're obstructing in that area and you try to remove them, then you can actually damage the fallopian tube. So it gets a little more complicated, but there are many options. There are ablation techniques where you kind of destroy the lining of the uterus, which is that's a little trickier depending on what's going on with the fibroids. And then there's the interventional radiology procedure, which is just blocking some of the blood flow to the uterus, because they need blood flow to grow. And so if you can diminish the blood flow, sometimes they'll shrink. And then there are medications too, and some other things that can be done.
So one observation I made about every culture around the world, whether it's on the south side of the hood or not, or wherever, is that women are under tremendous pressure to be reproductively successful. Okay, and especially just a day and age where women they're career women, so they have to find that balance. So when should a woman consider freezing her eggs, and what does that process even entail?
Okay. Well, freezing eggs, that's an option for women who have, the eggs come from the ovaries. Okay, so if you have ovarian disease like ovarian cancer, where you're going to have your ovaries removed, or if you're high risk, say you're high risk for ovarian cancer, then you want to think, well, when am I going to develop cancer? Am I going to develop cancer? What should I do about my eggs? That's the conversation you want to have when you think you're at risk for a procedure that might require that you have your ovaries removed. Breast cancer, because if you are at very high risk for breast cancer, if you have the gene, you have a very strong family history, the hormones that stimulate the cancerous cells, those hormones come from the ovaries. And so you will see in the media, I mean, Angelina Jolie is one of the ones that was real high profile for that, is having her breasts and her ovaries removed because of a high risk scenario. So you can freeze your eggs if you think that you're going to have to lose your ovaries at some point, or your premature ovarian failure. If you're worried about that, then you may want to see if you can have your eggs. But that's a very unusual and very costly procedure, and I don't know that it's always covered by insurance. I don't know how all of that works out. Those are things to consider, though.
And as we wrap up here, we always want to finish off with regards to the big issue, because the mission of the S.H.E.L.T.U.H podcast is understanding or promoting the importance of how career development and financial literacy impacts someone's health and their health outcomes, this well-being development aspect. And with regards to that, this whole importance of self-knowledge, self-sufficiency, women's choice. How does, a young lady who's grown up in today's society, how does their knowledge of their individual health sort of impact their health outcomes? Can you talk about that?
How their knowledge?
How their self-knowledge can impact their health outcomes.
We want to put them in the driver's seat to control,
right.
their own healthcare outcomes.
Right, so the more you know, the more more information you have, the more choices you can make, the better choices you can make. So you can wait for someone to teach you, or you can find answers. So you can ask questions, with your visits or in your community, or different forums like this. There are opportunities to ask questions. The internet has local community libraries, for example, taking online courses. You can learn whatever you want to learn there, and that applies to health as well. When you have take control and choose to take control over your health, which can take courage and take some effort, you're in a better position to advance in your career, in your society, and community. You're a role model. You're a great opportunity for other people, young people and other people in your community, to see what the benefits of good, healthy living. And again, you're a blessing to the generations to follow, because you're modeling good health, and you're passing good health habits and choices on to your children and their children.
And one last question. I know we run short for time, but I got to put you on the spot a little bit. Okay, so just keep it real natural. You being the superwoman gynecologist that you are for women's health in general, if there is one thing in healthcare delivery as far as women's health that you'd like to change, what would it be?
One thing in women's health, if I could change, I would like to empower people, inspire women to understand the role that they play in their health. I think it's very tempting to just rely on medication. There's lots of advertisements to take meds. You're going to take medication for the rest of your life. You're going to deal with the side effects from the medication. Are you trusting that something synthetic and made for you? There are times when you need that. There's a time when you need an antibiotic. There's a time when you need something for your diabetes. But do you need that for the rest of your life? Is your body is equipped to care for itself, to heal and to repair itself, right? So I would like for women to understand that and look for ways that they can support that natural healing, repair mechanisms of their bodies. Your health and the power lies within you is the way I like to think of it.
That's true. Yeah, I like that. That's dope.
Me and yourself? Good. So first of all, I want to thank you for just being here. It's been a journey. Just when this all started, this literally all started in our living room, bro, when we were just talking. and catching up and just really trying to keep pushing the envelope as far as what we as medical students or future healthcare professionals can do for our community. And so, but in order for us to sort of implement and build upon that dream, we need people like you that supports us, and we want to thank you for that. We really appreciate that. In reference to Mother's Day being tomorrow, thank you for being who you are and what you represent and what you bring to our community and what you just do.
Well, I
So
thank
thank you.
you. I thank you for that, and I thank you guys for what you do, because you're two young men at an age and a time in your life where you could be out doing a number of different things, but you're choosing to do something for your community. You're choosing to make a difference. You're choosing to educate. You could be at home studying, right? Trying to be the top of your class, being the first, you know, you get that mindset, right? That stress to produce and to perform, but you're here. And you're reaching back, and you're taking the time to reach back and help somebody else.
We definitely appreciate that. So I know there are a lot of people, a lot of young ladies who would love to get in contact with you. So here's the plug time. So if you ever want to get in contact with Dr. Charisse, you can reach her Instagram at Dr. Charisse MD, DoctorCharissMD, all one word, at Dr. Charisse MD. And you go to her website at www.drcharisse.com. Again, Instagram is Dr. Charisse MD, and the website is www.drcharisse.com, spell out doctor. If you have any questions for her, please reach out to her Instagram. If you have any questions that you would like for us to relate to Dr. Charisse, please reach us at _S.H.E.L.T.U.H. That's S.H.E.L.T.U. with the UH, not an ER, S.H.E.L.T.U.H. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
No problem.